Joining us now on the program is one of our local leaders in the state legislature. Noah Arbit is a Democrat representing Michigan's 20th District in the Michigan House of Representatives and joins us now on the Megacast. Noah, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Tyler. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. As you got some news out of your office this week. You will be introducing, or you have introduced recently, some legislation regarding hate crimes in the state of Michigan. You're set to announce that legislation later on this week alongside Attorney General Dana Nessel. So tell us about this legislation that's addressing what unfortunately has become a growing issue in Michigan and throughout the U.S.
This is the legislation will be introduced this week, and we'll be announcing it on Wednesday alongside the Attorney General. This is something that is very important to our community here in West Bloomfield, as diverse as our community is. We have seen rising hate crimes in the state of Michigan, and of course across the country as well, particularly targeting Black, Asian, LGBTQ+ and Jewish communities across the state. For the past 10 years, every year on year, we have seen a rise in hate crimes. And I think it's important just to set the table on this. Hate crimes are unique among crimes because they are always intended to send a message. And it's really important for us to send a message back that hate violence will not be tolerated in the state of Michigan. Of course, with hate crimes, there's not just one victim, there's an entire community that's also victimized. And that's really important to remember, right? And so our legislation will reform Michigan's hate crime laws, strengthen Michigan hate crime laws. This is, for all the people in West Bloomfield know that this is something that, I was talking about a lot last year during my campaign. And something's very personal to me as a member of the Jewish and LGBTQ communities. West Bloomfield actually has one of the highest rates of hate crimes or bias incidents in the state historically, because we have such a diverse community here, and it's something that's really important to our community. Actually, the law that we have on the books right now, the Ethnic Intimidation Act, was passed in 1988 and was introduced by a Republican state representative from West Bloomfield 35 years ago. But our law has not been updated in the past 35 years. And so while we've seen this, rise, for the past few decades in particular, our legal architecture has not, kept up with best practices developed across the country. So it's really time for us to strengthen the law, to reform the law. One of the things that the Michigan Hate Crime Act, which is the legislation I'll be introducing this week, does is add, categories that, that can be based on, hate crimes can be based on, including sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, but as well as physical and mental disability and ethnicity. And this is just so incredibly important to recognize that there's a larger group of people that are targeted with hate crimes than our law currently reflects. It's really important to know that we are moving in a direction of restorative justice, and that's something, an additional piece that this law brings to bear. We also have another piece of legislation, the Institutional Desecration Act, which will protect houses of worship in particular, make it a crime to target houses of worship with defacement, desecration, vandalism, which is, we know that we have so many different houses of worship in West Bloomfield, so many different kinds, and to make sure that we are protecting our houses of worship and other communal institutions, this law will help, give Michigan an additional tool, a more refined tool, improve our tools to be able to respond, pursue justice and accountability, and reduce hate violence. So that's what this legislation does. It really is a sea change, landmark legislation for how Michigan approaches hate crimes.
And as you're working on this bill and preparing to propose it and announce it this week, how much work out? Obviously, you've talked about the work you've done in the West Bloomfield community and the Lakes area that you represent, but in terms of other areas of the state where hate crimes may be a little bit more various or maybe more pointed one area to the other, how have you worked with other leaders in the legislature and beyond to really craft where these laws should be going? As you said, this is an update of hate crime legislation in the state of Michigan rather than necessarily a new bill. It's simply just modernizing what we already have on the books.
Yeah, well, the existing hate crime law has not been updated in 35 years. This actually, for all intents and purposes, it is a new bill because it completely overhauls the legislation that we have on the books, and of course, creates the new crime of institutional desecration. Those are the two separate bills that are part of this legislation. On the package of bills with me, I have two additional sponsors. One is Representative Christian Grant who is the first Black woman to ever represent West Michigan. She represents the Grand Rapids area in the state legislature. And I also have Representative Ranjiv Puri, who is a Sikh American, Indian American, and represents the Canton area. And so these communities, the Black and Indian communities in particular, have been on the receiving end of a great deal of hate crimes, both in this state and across the country. And so it's really important that, I represent, of course, the Jewish and LGBTQ communities in terms of my personal identity, but bringing in other individuals who represent different communities was really important in terms of, making sure that this legislation represents the scope of communities that are impacted by rising hate crimes. And I think, this is just something that's really important because we haven't had, we've had a priority, but we haven't had a political will for so long to make sure that this got done. And this was something that, when I set out my campaign to represent Greater West Bloomfield in the State House, I said that it was my mission to move heaven and earth to ensure that Michigan is transformed from a national laggard to a national leader on hate crime prevention, intervention, and prosecution. So that's the promise that I am keeping this week with this legislation. We've been working assiduously with different partners as well as the Attorney General to make sure that this legislation is constitutional, is legally sound, and that addresses the needs of communities across the state. I think it's really important to recognize again that our hate crime law has not been amended in 35 years, which was 7 years before I was born. I think that this legislation is really to all the people who have survived and been victimized by hate violence in the state, to know that they are not alone and that their suffering it does not go unanswered. So that we will make sure that hate violence has no place in the state of Michigan.
Noah will be introducing this legislation at a press conference alongside Attorney General Dana Nessel on Wednesday of this week. Noah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tyler.